Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I got a video that's maybe a little bit unusual relative to what I normally do on the channel, but might, be of interest to some of y'all. Basically, what I want to do is, this video was inspired by a guy named Mark. He emailed me and asked, hey Nick, how do you check a knife for play? How do you go through and do all that kind of stuff? And what I figured I'd do is I'd adapt it to be a little bit wider and basically talk about when somebody hands me a brand new knife to evaluate that I've never dealt with before, what do I do? What am I looking for? And so my goal for this video is to take a knife out of the box for the first time. This is the Ontario Shikra, by the way. This was sent to me by a viewer named Josiah. Donated this to the channel, but I have never handled this particular model before, and I have not opened this box at all. You're going to have to trust me on that one, but what do I do? And I'm going to try and sort of verbalize all this, the steps, all the thinking that I'm doing as I'm doing this, and talk a little bit about what it is that I'm looking for when somebody hands me a brand new piece to check out. If I'm at a show and somebody says, hey Nick, check this out. What do you think? What am I doing? So I'm going to try and do that. I'm going to try and talk you through it very slowly and sort of give you my thoughts here. This is, by the way, not a substitute for a full review of this particular knife. Keep an eye out for the full review later, and we'll see what changes. But I'm gonna try and get that done. So, Mark, thank you for that, and Josiah, thank you for the subject of this, and let's go ahead and get started. So, the very first thing out of the box is, well, okay, box is fine. It's straightforward and easy, no particular confusion there. Take the knife out. All right, my first impression here is actually of weight. This is not a lightweight knife here. And so I could, I wouldn't normally measure it, but I can weigh this up and see, okay, we're coming in here at, well, grams are a good unit, but they're not the unit we use around here. Come on now, give me the right, oh, damn it, I just teared the damn thing. Let's try again. Ounces, well, it's negative 2.38 ounces when I take it off, so yeah, 2.38 ounces. So it's a little bit on the heavier side for being a relatively small knife, but that's not a big deal. Looking at this guy otherwise, I'm looking at this micarta here, and, looking at it, sure looks like a micarta. It's sort of a, for lack of a better term, there were good micartas in the world, and there were micartas that aren't so amazing, but I'm looking at this guy, and I'm seeing that it's kind of a very fuzzy micarta. It almost feels more like a felt that's been resined, rather than some of the nicer, shiny micartas out there that we see in the world. But it seems to look okay. So far, everything, yeah. So that's the next thing that catches my eye here. Moving on, flipping it over. Looks like we got ourselves a steel frame lock here, and given that this is probably a pretty inexpensive knife, and one of the questions I'd ask if somebody handed this to me at a show is, well, what's your price point? Because that sort of matters, right? This guy, like I said, was sent to me as a gift from a viewer, so I don't actually know the price point yet, but nonetheless, that's something I would figure out later on. But I'm noticing that this appears to be a steel frame lock. I'm noticing right now that we have a cutout for the ability to carry it tip up and tip down. Okay, whatever. Not a big deal. I'm seeing a lock bar insert right here. And in fact, I'm seeing an over-travel stop right underneath it there. So all of those things are actually going to be helpful and useful. Particularly, well, actually, the over-travel stop doesn't come up that much, but it's certainly a nice thing to have. Next thing I'm looking at right here is actually the bearings. I'm looking at this guy and I'm seeing, okay, it looks like we have, based on what I'm seeing here, it looks like we've got some steel-caged bearings in there. So that's nice. We should expect the action to be pretty good. So the next step, of course, is deploy the blade. Let's see what the action is like. I'm going to try not to use some wrist here. Oh, there. That's a detent. Okay, wow, that's a detent. That's a very, very strong detent. Way stronger than I expected. But that's okay. We'll see. Maybe that was a first deployment jitter here. Go ahead and put it back in there. That's a strong lock bar tension. Putting this guy back together, like, whoa, that takes some doing. This is often a symptom of steel frame locks, right? They have a lot of strong tension, but let's see if the second deploy is any easier. Okay, it looks like I had maybe my finger on the lock bar there, so popped. Oh, boy, is that lock bar pressure. But okay. Whew. So this guy has a very, very strong detent, held in likely by a very, very strong lock bar. So yeah, there's that. So action-wise, it deploys reliably once you can actually deploy it. And I imagine part of it's just calibrating my hand and brain to both keeping my fingers off the lock bar and to getting everything used to that. So okay, next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take a look at the blade here. Let's see about the blade. Thickness, not too crazy. Looks maybe 0.12, something along those lines. I could actually take out a caliper if I wanted to actually measure this up here. Is that, no, this is in millimeters, but that's okay. Yeah, about 3 millimeter, which corresponds to, yeah, about 0.11. Okay. Yeah, 0.12, 0.11, someplace in that vicinity. Well within the error, the rate of the calipers there. But nonetheless, we got a decent blade stock. Not too crazy thin, not too crazy thick. Stock thickness is the next thing I'll look at here. And what we see here is this comes, I'm sorry, not stock thickness, grind thickness. This actually comes out to a relatively fine grind down here. And so that's actually kind of nice. At the bottom here, a little less fine, but it also looks like they just barely missed the sharpening choil. The sharpening choil comes out just a little bit further. Or, I'm sorry, doesn't come out quite far enough to cover the entirety of the plunge. Not the end of the world, but it's a thing. Looking down the blade. So now, right now, I'm kind of looking. It's hard for me to show this on camera, but what I'm effectively doing is I'm looking down the blade as if I was doing this. Because what that lets me see is how thick the blade is behind that edge there. Because you can have a thin tip and a thin base, but you can thicken up in the edge sometime. Generally speaking, you don't, but yeah, looks to be okay. So I'm looking at this with one eye down the road, and I see what's going on there. So that's good. Next thing I'm going to want to check for is play. So when I'm checking for side-to-side play and up-and-down play, what I'll do is I'll hold the knife in my hand as I normally would. And then I'll kind of go back and forth like this. So right now I'm just applying back and forth, basically pull like this, trying to get this knife to basically close. And so as I'm doing this, I can be pretty safe about it because I feel the flipper tab up against this finger, and if it starts to give, I'll stop giving pressure. But nonetheless, it looks like there is no vertical play on this knife at all. That's good. Side-to-side play. What I'll generally do is hold the knife like this, where I've got my thumb and forefinger here. And I'll just kind of, again, I'm wiggling back and forth on this axis here, and I'm trying to see if there's any wiggle at all. There really isn't. That's good. I'm actually very happy about that. If I was feeling any wiggle back and forth, that would be a danger sign. I've actually heard of some people doing tests for side-to-side play with the lock disengaged. Honestly, I mean, sure, shine on, you crazy diamond, but I've never found a real reason for that, because by and large what I'm concerned about with lockup is not when the knife is unlocked, but when the knife is locked. Certainly, one would expect that a knife with really good washer support is going to have no play in no matter what the blade's doing, but it's definitely a factor. Next thing I'm checking here is sort of the shutting action. So, yeah, looks like a single push with the finger puts this guy shut. No problem. And actually, while I'm here, I'm finding myself staring at the centering. Centering here is very slightly favoring the show side, or I'm sorry, the lock side. Not by much. I mean, if it is, it's maybe 55, but well, I don't know if it's 55 or 45, but either way, it's just a little tiny bit off, but it ain't so bad off. There's not a major concern there. So no play, vertical or horizontal, and centering looks pretty damn solid. No real arguments there. Next things I'm going to start looking at are actually a little bit more in the detail domain. I'm going to start looking for, very regular issues. So I'm going to start looking to see, okay, can I touch the tip of the knife when it's closed? By the way, I just happened to notice that the micarta here is actually maybe it's an optical illusion, but it sure seems like the micarta is cut a little bit bigger at the end here than the steel is on the other side. So the micarta is a little higher. It'd be a little hard to test. That sure looks to be the case, right? Either way, there's certainly a lot more micarta on this side. There's no recessed liner in there, so it's just micarta. Probably there's a steel washer on the inside of the micarta over here, but still. Okay, nonetheless, I digressed there real quick. What was I looking at for a second there? I got caught up in the micarta. Oh, yeah, I'm just checking to see, for instance, whether I can touch the tip of the knife when it's closed, because that's an important, basic sort of thing. And no, I don't appear to. I can't touch the heel of the blade when it's closed, and that's yet another important thing here. I'm looking for, the tent strength on this is strong. So it's not the case that, for instance, if I do this, it's going to pop open. This is not really a test that matters that much, but it has in the past legally mattered in, for instance, New York City. Luckily, Knife Rights has done a pretty good job of knocking that law down for the most part, but talk to a lawyer, not a jackass on the internet. It's not an automatic, so it won't automatically fire open in the pocket or anything like that. The sharpened edge does not come anywhere near the back spaces. Kind of looking through here and down that curve, and so I can see, yeah, the edge isn't anywhere near there, so that couldn't be hitting. No blade play. There's no rattle here. When it's closed, it feels quite solid. It's not the case that the blade is rattling around in here. There's not what's called the tent play on there. It's centered. There don't appear to be any major gaps between parts here. Everything seems to be reasonably tight. It's an original design. These are the kinds of very basic things that I start looking for when I'm handling something. If any of those issues are there, if we've got really bad blade play, if we've got signs of a really bad lockup. Like if I'm doing the vertical blade play test and it disengages the blade, or sometimes I can test the lockup by doing something like this, where I'm pressing upwards both here and kind of holding downwards in the pivot in the middle there. Yeah, that's actually pretty solid. I'm not seeing any sign of lockup issues. I am feeling that there's a little bit of a sharpened edge up at the top back here. It's not the end of any worlds, but it's definitely something I'll complain about later on. But it's a budget knife, so I can't get too bad out of shape with it, right? But then at that point, it's sort of on to the details. It's on to looking at other details. It's on to looking at other things. I already started looking at this micarta, which I gotta say, out of the box, not super impressed by. I mean, it looks like micarta, but in practice, it just looks like kind of beat up G10 or something like that. It's not the kinds of luxurious micarta, he says, like a jackass. Do I have luxurious micarta handy? I do not offhand, but nonetheless, that's okay. So there's that. But then other folks always ask, Nick, but you talk about so many other things. How do you do that? Well, actually, I'm going to plug something that I talked about way in the past, though. This is my excellent Pocketknife Checklist. This is one of the more jackassy things I've ever done with my existence, but this came about as somebody, I had a knife maker, and I have a whole video about this where I walk through all of these things. I've made a couple of little tiny tweaks since I created this, but for the most part, I stand by it, right? What we talked about already were the basic requirements. Oh, I didn't check the lockup percentage, but it would have jumped out at me if it was crazy. Yeah, looking about 30%. No problems there. But anyways, these are the very, very basic safety things, and we can see here that I've already looked at, like, edge thickness. I've looked at sharpening choil, looking at the edge symmetry. Yeah, looks fine. And usually at this point, if something like that is bad wrong, I'll kind of catch it. It jumps out at me, just because I've handled a lot of things like that. No hardware in the slicing path. All of these things are just little blade-related issues. Ergonomically speaking, put it in the hand. A little bit of a hot spot off the clip, not too terrible. This side of this ain't great. The steel is Os-8. It better be inexpensive, but that's kind of what it is. But everything else seems to be okay. I can check the action deployment, smooth open, close. Yep, indeed. There doesn't appear to be any effect of the texturing on there. I'm just noticing, by the way, the grind is a little complex, and it looks symmetrical. It's not the case that, for instance, this side goes way up here and the other side is pulled back down there. It's nice. Clip seems okay. A little tight. These screws are in the path, but not a big deal. I mean, all of these things are things that I would look for in this. Maintenance and long-term care, not quite as important when you've got yourself a relatively inexpensive piece, but it looks like we've got T6 in the back here. It might be even T7. I don't know. Well, maybe T8? Could this be T8? No, it's probably T6, T7, something like that. But nonetheless, and I'll do the full disassembly once I get a hold of it. That'll help me with my actual review. Warranty, again, it's a relatively inexpensive knife, so I'm not as concerned about that. Logistics and purchasing. These things here are much more in the way of things that the maker should be thinking about rather than facts of the knife themselves. And then in terms of bonus stuff, I don't expect a whole lot of bonus here, but yeah, no detent ball ramp. The detent ball looks to be... What is our detent ball here? It looks like it might even be ceramic in there. That is... No, that's a steel detent ball. Not the end of the world. Again, budget. No extra, go the extra mile details. No left-hand clip. Not a big deal. Same screw, no. But again, all of these things are things that I'm kind of looking for. And by and large, if a knife shows up on my table and all of these boxes are checked, everything is good to go, then by God, it's going to be a pretty excellent piece. And so when new makers say, Nick, how would I know what you think about a knife? This is a really good way to start. If you've nailed all of these things, or at least if you've got really good explanations why you couldn't do all of them, the ones that you're not doing, then, you're on a really good track. But anyways, that's the kind of thing I do. When somebody hands me something brand new, it's it's a much quicker process. In practice, it's going to be actually quite rapid. It's just like, oh, okay, let's see here. And, people will see me do this at shows and whatnot, and usually by the end of that, I have a reasonably good sense of the cut of a certain piece's jib. I have a reasonable good sense if it's going to be something that's going to be, massively flawed. Maybe, reasonable, oh my God, good. So anyways, I am impressed with the action on this. Once I've gotten my fingers off the dent ball, the lock bar, that is, everything gets a little easier. But yeah, that's how I form my first impressions. That's how I do those kinds of safety checks, and that's how I would start off if somebody handed me something brand new. By the way, it's worth a try after you handle something for a little while and flip it a bunch of times. Check for play one more time. Sometimes you get screws that loosen themselves as the knife is operated, and that's not great. But anyways, from here out, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take this guy apart. Not like right now, not in this same video, but I'll do that in the future. Then I'll actually spend some time carrying the knife, and that's the biggest determiner, right? Because there can be knives that have a couple of little flaws, but are so good for carry, so good for everyday life that it's just not even a problem. Or at least it's something I'm willing to overlook. But yeah, so I'll do the disassembly, then I'll carry it, and then eventually I'll come around for a full review. But that's how I get it started. So anyways, there you go. I hope this was interesting. This checklist, by the way, is available at nickshabazz.com/checklist. It's always there, always available, and anybody's more than welcome to use it. And like I said, at some level it's a little pretentious, but hey, it can't hurt, right? And that's an easy way for makers to cross a bunch of little issues off the list, which actually still slip through in a depressingly large number of production pieces. So there you go. Hope this was interesting to you. Thank you very much for the knife, Josiah. Thank you very much for the inspiration, Mark. And most of all, have yourselves a wonderful rest of your day. Bye now.